Hello and welcome to another Random Code stream. I am going to be working on another analyzer in this stream. On the last one I did, I worked on this analyzer, which looks for within your code in C Sharp. It looks through and says if you're using any of these non-generic types from system collection, because they're old and busted. Hey Mitch, how you doing? They're old and busted, and nobody should be using those anymore. So let me get some music going here. Um, the odds of people using these types, like I mentioned in the last stream, is very very small. You know, especially in 2025, nobody should be using these anymore. It, it's possible maybe you're using an old library somewhere that still returns something that's an array list. Again, that's probably highly doubtful at this point. But part of this, the point of this library is a vehicle for education to kind of show you and give you examples of how you do things with the compiler API. And this is legitimate. I mean, you shouldn't really be using these anymore, and this will flag them if you ever did for some bizarre reason. But reality is nobody's using these types anymore. Before I get into the other thing that I'm going to work on with non-generic collection types is I should get the desktop audio on. So I got that little music in the background. All right. In the last episode, near the end, I rambled about TypeScript and Go and compilers, and the point that I don't think I got across, that I got kind of sidetracked, old man yelling at clouds and just rambling on, was the fact that Anders makes a point that TypeScript and using AI to kind of convert, like they did some proof of concepts to get TypeScript into Go because it maps pretty well, but they didn't want to keep doing it all by hand. So they basically wrote something that looked at the TypeScript syntax tree and then mapped that into Go as much as they could, and then have to do little fix-ups, which is much faster. And I don't think I made this point at the end of the last video, so I'll make sure I make it here. He said one of the questions I got asked is, did you use AI for this? Because of course you have to use AI. Who doesn't use AI these days? AI is everywhere. Yeah, he makes the point that he said at the time they tried it, and it said it worked, but it wasn't consistent enough. And he goes, now, even in 6 months, maybe, he goes, but the thing that they needed was deterministic behavior. They need to say, we're going to give this TypeScript input. We know we're always going to get this Go output. We can't have something that's going to, give this output one time and this output another time and this output another time, where they're really close, but they're not quite the same. And so, that's the thing that I like about just stuff like this, is the fact that this is deterministic. This will work exactly the same way every single time. And it will always look for these types, and who knows the state of the art and how that changes over time. I think that's the one thing that I've personally found in using things like Copilot and whatnot, is it can be somewhat helpful at times, but it also can be very annoying. Sometimes, Mitch, I do these in the morning if I got a little time before I actually have to start doing real work. So, like I actually turned off at work the Copilot, I don't know what you call it, within the code editor. Whenever I was typing a key, it was constantly coming up with suggestions, and it was just brutal noise. It wasn't helpful at all. Sometimes it would nail what I was doing and have more of a contextual view of what I was doing in the code. And there's also, I think, something called IntelliCode within Visual Studio. I don't know if those two have more merged over time, but sometimes if I'm starting to do edits, like a repeated edit over and over again, at least 2 or 3 times, Visual Studio starts to pick that up and it starts offering that in other places in code. So you can just start hitting tab and it makes that change a lot faster than what it used to be. And that's very helpful. I like stuff like that. Sometimes using GitHub Copilot Chat, and I've done that a couple times for a couple things, and it's been okay, but both times it's like it's given me a structure to start with, but it hasn't been right. I've always had to go back and change it and fix it and make it actually work. So, you know, I get where people say, oh, give it time, it'll get better, it's getting better, it's getting better, it's getting better. And okay, I believe that. I believe technology, we can make things better and keep making them better. But I've always been a skeptic. And that doesn't mean I'm being negative. It's just looking at something and being honest with what works well and what doesn't. You know, what helps me as a developer write better code. If tools can help me do that, I'm all for that. If there are tools out there that make it really difficult or annoying, I don't want any part of that. So, you know, and the thing is always keep an open mind, but also be honest with what works and what doesn't. So, the ghost text was really annoying. Yeah, I had to disable it. Same thing. So, all right. So the thing I'm going to do in this episode is basically do something similar, which is we don't want these things being used. Now I want to say if you make a type definition, it shouldn't be part of your hierarchy, your type inheritance hierarchy. Again, very rare, but this illustrates I want to do this with the compiler API as an analyzer. How do I do it? So that's what I want to do. I want to say I don't want you to create something like public class customers that derive from an array list. Don't do, or even if it's higher up the inheritance hierarchy, just keep looking through and saying this should never be in your hierarchy. So let's do that. And the name I came up with was this really long name. So let's go into here. And by the way, if you're a Visual Studio user like me and you're wondering, what did I do to actually have that come up? So if I'm on like anywhere within a project or whatever, if I do Control-Shift-A, that brings up this add new item thing. And you can actually put files in here. You know, you can show all templates, which then, wait, why is that not? Is it Alt-A? There we go, Alt-A. I was doing the wrong one. And then I can do Alt-C to go back to the compact view. And you can put JSON in here, whatever, you know. It defaults to C#, so I can just do that. I could also put in analyzers and a slash and then a file name, and it'll put, or you could just do this and then it'll put that folder there. So it's kind of nice. I like, they added this in like a year ago, and it's one of those small, you know, tweaks that they keep making to Visual Studio, but it just makes it that much quicker to add a file. So, all right. So this is all the boilerplate that you have to do, but oh well. And we're gonna have to put this in there, so let's just do that. An analyzer that finds type definitions I use in its inheritance hierarchy. Good enough. Okay, I'm gonna do that. We're gonna have to do this at some point. We need a descriptor here. That comes later. We are gonna need an overload here. Override, I should say, sorry. We'll get to that later, and then this. And then that. Okay, so now we need a descriptor. Grab that name. And then we'll just again do that. We'll need to put in a new identifier ID. And type an inheritance. Inheritance. There. All right. Let's go to our ID list. And these IDs can be anything you want. You'll see like with C# compilation errors or their own analyzers, they'll do something like CA8421, whatever. But they've kind of limited themselves to having 4 digits here. And I've noticed with their analyzers, they seem to kind of follow their version. So they've had like 8, start seeing CA9. What happens when you get to 10, or you want to start, are they going to start doing like this? Maybe, I don't know. But they also have CA, I think they've started with 1. So I don't know why they started with 1,000. Who knows? But I always just start with 1, and then I just increase the number there. It just has to be something that's unique. EA stuff seems to be getting better, but still a long way to go in my opinion. Don't even get me started on a vibe. Yeah, vibe coding. I don't know how long you've been doing this, Mitch, or if anybody comes in later or watches this later or whatever, but I've been doing this for a while, and sometimes the terms that come up about what we do as software engineers and developers, just blah. The whole vibe coding thing, I just think is stupid. Just the word, I'm like, ugh. You're just vibing, you're just typing, you're just telling it what to do, and it does it, and then you vibe some more, and it's like, no, stop. Again, not saying there isn't worth in using something that maybe almost like a pseudo-psychologist that helps you say, hey, I want you to do this. Okay, it tries to do it and help you. Okay. But I don't vibe when I code. And I refuse to use that term. So, oh yeah, we got to do that in a second. Okay, so I think I've got everything now. Let's speaking of the noise, let's get rid of we want that up here still. Did we change the ID here? Typed it. Yeah, we did. Okay. Get rid of that. Okay. So this is what we actually want to hit. We got to put a little boilerplate in front of it. And now we have a decision. Spent a few days the other week trying to use agent mode, but the code quality is poor and doesn't work in large solutions when there are many files. Yeah, I've heard that too. Again, you hear about the big companies are like, oh yeah, we're not hiring engineers anymore. We're gonna completely use AI to generate all of our code, and we don't need them anymore. And I'm just like, I just feel like the scene in Batman, it's the second one, The Dark Knight, and Or Morgan Freeman says to the guy across the other table who's like, you're seriously considering bribing like one of the richest men ever or whatever, and basically says you're basically saying you're completely full of shit if you try to do this. And he just looks at him and goes, well, good luck. you know, if it works and he saved money, I guess, but you know, I don't know. Again, I still think it's tools that can help, and if it helps, great. But I think we're still a ways off from saying, you know, to me, it's always been the case of, if you're looking at technology to replace people, you're using technology wrong, or you're misguided in some way. You should be training people, or encouraging them to move into areas that with technology that's proven that maybe make it easier to get stuff done. I brought up the example of CNC machines. I remember seeing those. Yeah, that was like 35 years ago, where when I was working, where my dad worked as a sales manager, and they built air compressors. And when I was in college, I'd worked there during the summer. First 2 summers I had to work in the factory, but then I was able to actually start working in the engineering department to get some real experience. And you'd see people that worked on these assembly lines, 5-6 people working on just taking parts and then eventually putting them all together, and then you get more or less the compressor on the other end. And then you saw somebody, like, they started putting in one of these CNC machines that basically was one person who could put like this part in, like 15 of them or whatever, put them in this thing and then stick it in the machine, and it basically tapped all the holes, threaded them, all this stuff, and took care of what somebody could, they didn't have to manually do all this stuff. And so you could arguably say, well, maybe this is getting rid of 2 or 3 people because only one person has to do it. But you still need one person to man the machine, program it, make sure that, because the tolerances are very tight, you still have to make sure that it's doing things correctly and so on. So it's like, it enables the company, it helps the company, but does it eliminate it? I think it transfers jobs, where if you look at like what I'm doing here, I'm not doing machine code. I'm not doing assembly code. This is an abstraction removed from what's actually over here, which you can't see, but the machine, the processor, and what it actually does with this code. If we get to the point where we start coding, but it's even at a higher level of abstraction, maybe we get there. Maybe that truly becomes a reality. I'd be cool with that. If we could make coding even simpler and it still does things fast and it's efficient and all this other stuff, great. But I personally still don't quite see it there just yet. So, but anyway, all right. Moving on. So what do we actually have to do here now? So like here we're doing a start action, and I think we want to kind of do something here that's similar, but we're not going to be looking for an operation. We do want all these types here because we need to look for them. But what we want to register here is, I think, a syntax node action. And what we want to do, I think, do I have another example in this project doing this? Yes, I do. Yeah, so what we want to do is something like that. All right, so let's clean this up a little bit. Oh, we should call this compilation context because it's not a operation context. Right. Oh, yeah. Okay, wait a minute. Yes, I'm emphasis on the wrong syllable. Okay. We want to say analyze type declaration. And I'll fill that out in a second. Wait, that's the compilation context. And then we say that. Right, okay. Yep, and then we say syntax kind type okay, so we could also do record declaration. I don't think these are flags because there's so many syntax kinds. I love their comment here. Do not change numbers or you will break binary compatibility. Yeah. That's hilarious. So I think we can do class declaration. We don't have to worry about interface declarations. Technically, a record can. No, you can't. You can't derive a record from anything other than another record, I believe. So we don't have to worry about that case. We don't have to worry about wait, we want God. Right, and then we do oh right, we gotta sorry. There. There we go. Okay. Too many parentheses and squirrelies. Okay. So I only have to we don't have to worry about anything other than a class declaration. Now what we want is like if I look here, I can take the node and turn it into a type. So we'll do that and say this is a type declaration. And now we should be able to, in this case, this is a little simplistic, but we can go var, I believe off the, yeah, you do. See, that one was helpful. We want to now get var type symbol, which is, you gonna do it for me? No, you're not that smart enough. Get declared symbol for the type node. Yeah, that should work. And yeah, so now what we want to do is we want to just go through all of the oh, and there's a params here that you could use. Is there? No, there isn't. What I want to avoid. So what I could do, okay. Let's do that. Shit, I can't. Yeah, I can. So we're going to have private this equals new, and then we'll take that. I got to keep the context around. I can't pass it into the delegate. What are you barking about? Avoid storing per compilation data of type into the fields of a diagnostic. Okay, I can kind of see why it's telling me that. I guess part of me is maybe overthinking this, and that I don't want these. I don't want to make this list every single time. But I can't figure out a way to say, like this action where I could pass in something to it. It's interesting in this one. You can. Well, wait a minute. Why don't we just... Oh, okay. I'm being stupid. This is a operation context. We want this to be a syntax. Node context. And so what we want to do here right, okay, sorry. Took me a second. Context, sometimes I get confused as to where what I'm doing and where I'm going. Okay, so let's pass this in here. And then we'll say here, syntax, no context, collection types. And then, come on, get off. There, okay. And actually, I think I don't even need this. Right. Oh, that looks ugly. There, okay. How would you cache it? I don't know. I was thinking I'd just put it at the field because I think these analyzers are made once per, especially in the IDE, like it makes an instance of this once, and that's what the initialize is called. And so if I was making them there, but as I just found out, I was like, no, I wasn't quite thinking about it right. I needed to pass in that to this method as an action here and saying pass that context into here. So it just took a second for my brain to wrap around what I wanted to actually do. I guess arguably we could avoid a closure by putting... Well, no, then we would close around compilation context. Never mind. So that's fine. It's one. It gets done right, at the beginning, and then we're done. Okay, sorry. So what I want to do now is say var parent base type is equal to type symbol base type, while parent type is not null. And then we also want to do assign it. Oh yeah, we want to do that. Okay, cool. Watching my time here. Are found non-generic base. So now I want to say if collection types contains parent base type. Yep. And so we're just walking up the hierarchy. Now we want to say if we found it, now we want to report the diagnostic. Except we're going to use that. There we go. That's good enough. All right, and we're done. Pack it up. We can go home. Let's lay a couple tests real quick before I stop, and I'll have to finish it off camera, but I think this should give us what we're looking for. So let's again grab this long name. And let's say tests. And let's do that. I've already got a thing in to get rid of this, but that's off camera. We can make these internal static classes. I'll avoid this one for now. Let's do analyze. Base type is not non-generic collection async. So what we want to have here now is, let's just say public sealed class customers. Easy. That should work, right? And we shouldn't have any errors with that. And it passes. Now we want analyze when base type is. So now we need to do and again we could do the same thing here. We could make these a test case. Okay, can do that. And now we're going to say it derives from type name. Now it says it's going to be around the type declaration. Actually, let's change that. Let's make this type identifier. There, because otherwise it would be around the whole type, and that could, the red squiggle gets really annoying. What we really want it to be around is that. Excuse me. Is non-generic. Okay. Does this work? And they all pass. Now, the thing that debating in my head is we want to do this where a type is deriving from it, but then we're deriving from that type. So we're actually going to end up with two. So maybe we just do that in this test. Like we have public, let's make this not sealed. And then let's also have, we'll call them special customers. That derives from this, but that derives from one of these. So both of these are wrong. And that works too. Nice. Nice, nice, nice. So this test is kind of doing both, but I can't figure out, well, at least in my head right now, how I'd have to have that code in another assembly. And you can do this. I do this in rocks where I'm checking visibility of internal types because that can or can't work for mocking. So I generate a compilation where another compilation references that compilation and then does things with accessibility that way. I could do that with this and then say like that compilation has that deriving, so that's not part of the error, and then do this as a separate test, but both of these get flagged, you know, and that's perfectly fine. I could put this in there too and show that no, that one's not getting flagged at all. But that's good enough for me. I like that. And again, the simplicity of, you know, I mentioned this in the last stream. This isn't trivial stuff. Definitely, this is not trivial stuff with the compiler API. But a decent amount of what I was doing in this stream was boilerplate. Just getting like, you got to have a rule and you got to have an initialize overridden. And then this stuff is just, you put this basically in every single one to start. That's just validation and setup. And then, you know, this is where the meat starts coming into play. This is where you're actually putting the meat around the bones and figuring out what is it that you want to do. But with the compilation API, that's what you're trying to do, is just say, and I always mention this to people, is like, just say, even without the compiler API, just anything you do in software development, what is it that you're trying to do? You know, sometimes people, I think, get lost into the weeds and start going, I can't get this to work, and they lose sight of the context, they lose sight of the picture, and it's like, just back up for a second. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you're trying to do? In this case, it's, I want to look for a type declaration when somebody's declaring a type, and it's using one of these non-generic collections as a base type. That's all you have to say. So then, yeah, you have to go, okay, well, you need to know what symbols are. You need to know that you have to use this comparer for this, and kind of build this up. You know, that's coding. You just have to go, okay, well, now what are those base types that I'm looking for, and putting them in this way, and checking for them, and making sure I go up the hierarchy. But this isn't a lot of code. You know, this is custom, then this isn't, but then this is, okay, now I got to walk the hierarchy and find it. And if I did find it, I just report the diagnostic at the right location. Looks good. Would it be beneficial to cover generic constraints? Generic constraints on what? For this analyzer, I don't understand why I would. Especially with these. I mean, these are non-generic, so there is no generic constraint. Unless you're referring to something else that I'm not picking up on. I know there's a delay, so I'll wait for you to put in an answer. Of course, you're literally halfway around the world. I know you say you live in Australia, so the bit's got to fly all the way over there and then fly all the way back. So... I do know that there are things in rocks, just with generic constraints. Those definitely come into play, and I have to be cognizant about declaring constraints in all the generated code based off of the constraints that are in the type that I want to mock, and they're in the right order, and they actually influence sometimes, I think, even in type or method declarations with constraints on just the type parameters on the method. They can influence what may be put on for attributes. It gets really messy in a hurry. There's been a lot of hard work there to get that in the state that it's in. So, and that's one thing too I want to do with rocks is there are some projects out there that people have created. None of them really have any life at this point. But there were some that were also like, hey, let's use a source generator to create mocks. And I know one of the libraries was like, what are one of the to-dos? We have to support generic types. And I'm like, good luck. Again, good luck. Because that becomes much harder. It's not like impossible. I mean, Rocks does it, but it took a long time to find all of the corner cases and weirdness and all this stuff around constraints. So I'll say in that case, yeah, it's not simple. You know, building a library like Rocks is not simple. Public class C of T where T is system collection. Oh, I don't think it would matter. But I see what you're... Dude, really? Jeez. That's funny. I know it won't pick it up now. I absolutely know that it won't pick it up now. But that's a funny way to get around it. As constraint for no, it's an edge case, but it's a cute edge case. So if I say something like public class customers where T and then it's not part. So yeah. So in this case, I mean, I'm not doing the curiously recurring generic pattern either. That's not an example you're giving. But that is not a base class definition. But I think you've brought up another scenario. So yeah, it's not this. Like I'm trying not to do like where T derives from customers of T. And of course I'm botching the syntax here where T is also a like type name or something. And I don't think that would even be valid. Maybe it would. Maybe it wouldn't. I'm not sure. I do think that's the case for another analyzer, though, which is to look within constraints, both type and method generic constraints, and say, do any of these constraints constrain to a type? Like you can have where T is not null. You can have where T is unmanaged. You know, wouldn't care about those. What I would be looking for is where T is constrained to a type. And does that type derive from a non-generic type? You could do it. I mean, it is an edge case, not an edge case, but I think it's another scenario. You could, also say, I'm looking for object creation. I'm looking for non-generic types as base. So there's other ones too. Let's think about this. What other cases where T derives from array list? Public string or void work, where you pass in an array list. So types in constraints. Parameter types. Property types. Public array list customers. The same thing with indexers. And that would be parameter types would be an indexer. Field types. Private, read-only, array list, customers is equal to new. I guess even events would be one as well. I'm sure I'm missing others. But no, that actually is bringing up a good point, because I could be declaring a method. And return types. And I could do that and say, well, I'd want to flag those. I want to flag property types like this, field types. Variables I'm not too concerned about, because if you're making an array list yourself, that's the object creation analyzer that I just made before in the previous episode. So it would catch that. If you did like var customers equals new array list, I'm already catching that. If you're calling a method because that method returns an array list or something like that, well, that I can't control, because that might be in another dependency that you have no control over. You're not declaring that yourself. But if you declare a method in your project that either returns a non-generic collection or has as one of its parameters, its types is one of these, then yes, I should flag that. So yeah, there's more. I was just stretching my brain. So no, that's actually, that's what's good about this stuff, because you can start going, well, what about this? Do we want to catch this? And I think, this one's a little off the beaten path. I think it's valid, but why would you be constraining a type parameter? And I'm going to just make sure that I don't forget both type and method type parameters, because you can have methods, any constraint. And I wonder if there's if you can find that, see what you did to me, Mitch. If you can say here, constraint, class constraint, struct type constraint, type parameter constraint clause. Good. So I can narrow it down to one of those, I think. But I think these are all valid, and I think these are all kind of analyzers in and of themselves. And all of them should be somewhat easy to catch. When do you have a parameter definition? When do you have a property definition? When do you have a field definition? And then it's just a matter of looking at the types for all those and saying, are they one of these non-generic types? The types and constraint, that might be a little bit fun to work on. But no, I think these are valid, and I think that would be probably another episode, is just get through some of this stuff. But there are definitely other cases. before I stop, are there any others that I could think of off the top of my head? Not as a base type, not as an object creation, not as a parameter or a return type, not constraints, not properties or fields. Events, probably not. I don't think you have to, with the event, you always have to pass in the sender and the data. But if you're passing in like a custom event data package, or object, that second parameter, that would be caught by one of these analyzers that I'm putting in. And I don't like events anyway. So I don't think there's any other case that I really care about. I think that's enough. I'll put this in the issue in GitHub. If people like Mitch or others find like, hey, what about these? I'll put these in there and to say I'll cover these maybe in a future episode and try to get some of these done. But if there's any others, but I like that. I mean, the what if scenarios start making you go, well, wait a minute, why didn't we do it here? Why didn't we do this one? Because these are cases we want to flag as well. So I like that. I really do like that. I think that's taking this and making sure it's even more correct and more thorough. So is it only one diagnostic code per analyzer? You have to create a separate analyzer. You don't have to. Did find one use of a generic straight with array lists. Okay, that's fair. But you don't have to do that. It's really kind of up to you. So maybe I kind of tweak this. I kind of try to separate them out in mostly for organizational purposes, because it's like if you start putting too much within an analyzer, just like anything else, if you put too much in one thing, it starts becoming hard to test and keep isolated. There may be worth in combining all these into one, but there would definitely be different rules, different descriptors for different diagnostics. The analyzer itself, because maybe I don't want to make the collection types the same. So like right now, both of these are start actions. And so maybe I just put this in here and then registers. So that's actually another good point, Mitch, is to do maybe make one Uber analyzer and register all the work within that one. Again, that depends. I'm not sure how big that makes it. You can do, if you really wanted to, you could take all the analyzers you have and put them into one. It's just how do you want to organize it and structure it that makes the most sense to you. That's really a developer decision. There's nothing that the analyzer is going to enforce one way or the other. That's just up to you. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to stop the stream because I do need to get to work. I want to thank everybody for showing up that was watching the stream either now or in the future. If you have not subscribed to the channel just yet, please do so. I would greatly appreciate it. I'm getting closer to 1,000. That's my first goal, but any new subscription helps. So if you wouldn't mind subscribing, thank you in advance for doing that. And again, thank you to all those who have subscribed to the channel. I may do one more random code stream because Mitch gave me more work. So I might do one more this week at some point. Again, I have to leave Sunday for a business trip, and I'll be gone from Sunday to Friday of next week. So there'll be no streams while I'm out of the house and doing that business trip. I have to go to Detroit and do an on-site. So I'll be there. So no other gaming streams next week either. But I will be doing one tonight, Thursday, and probably Saturday afternoon. I'll be playing more Hollow Knight and trying to make more progress on that. So with that, I will stop this stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.